The Caribbean, long celebrated for its turquoise waters and sun-soaked beaches, is no longer just a tourist paradise. It's become a high-stakes geopolitical chessboard where the world's superpowers are making bold moves. The United States and Venezuela now find themselves on the brink of a confrontation that could reshape the entire region. What was once a simmering rivalry has escalated into a dangerous standoff, with both sides unwilling to back down. Tensions are boiling over, with military movements becoming more obvious by the day. Warships patrol the turquoise waters and convoys of armored vehicles roll through once peaceful ports, sending a clear message to the world. The stakes have never been higher. The situation is urgent and dangerous, with global power dynamics shifting rapidly. Newsrooms buzz with speculation, and military command centers are on high alert, their screens filled with real-time updates and satellite feeds. The U.S. government views Venezuela's leadership as a direct threat to regional stability and American interests. Officials speak in measured tones at press conferences, but behind closed doors, the rhetoric is far more intense. In Caracas, President Maduro stands defiant, rallying his people against what he calls American imperialism. His speeches ignite crowds, fueling a sense of national pride and resistance, even as the country faces economic hardship and international isolation. The introduction of China as a powerful player has turned a regional crisis into a global standoff. Beijing's support for Venezuela, both economically and militarily, has added a new layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Beijing's massive investments in Venezuela's infrastructure and energy sectors have raised the stakes exponentially. Chinese engineers and oil executives are now a common sight, their presence a constant reminder of the shifting alliances at play. This is a delicate dance of diplomacy and military posturing, where every gesture is scrutinized and every word carries weight. Behind closed doors, diplomats struggle to find common ground, while above, military jets slice through the Caribbean skies, a show of force that keeps everyone on edge. One wrong move, one miscalculation, could lead to disaster on a scale not seen in decades. The world watches nervously as generals and commanders weigh their options, knowing that the consequences of their decisions could be catastrophic. As of October 26, 2025, uncertainty looms over the Caribbean like a gathering storm. In Caracas, empty streets and anxious faces reflect a nation holding its breath, unsure of what tomorrow will bring. The world wonders, will diplomacy prevail, or will the Caribbean become a flashpoint for global conflict? The fate of millions hangs in the balance as leaders debate, negotiate, and prepare for every possible outcome. The memory of the Cuban Missile Crisis is a haunting reminder of how close we can come to the edge. The lessons of history echo loudly, warning of the dangers of brinkmanship and the catastrophic cost of miscalculation. This modern crisis, with advanced weapons and even higher stakes, is unfolding right in America's backyard. The world holds its breath, hoping that cooler heads will prevail before history repeats itself in the Caribbean. President Trump has made it clear that the crisis unfolding in Venezuela is not just a distant problem, but a direct challenge to American values and interests. From the very beginning of his presidency, Trump has taken a hardline stance, signaling that the United States will not stand idly by as chaos and suffering grip the Venezuelan people. The situation in Venezuela is, in his words, unacceptable. Massive protests fill the streets of Caracas as citizens demand change and basic necessities. The world watches as the country spirals deeper into economic collapse and political turmoil. The U.S. government, under Trump's leadership, has officially declared the Maduro regime illegitimate, accusing it of undermining democracy and fueling instability throughout the region. American officials have repeatedly called for free and fair elections, but Maduro's grip on power remains unyielding. The humanitarian crisis has spilled over Venezuela's borders, with millions of refugees fleeing to neighboring countries. Families are torn apart, and children suffer in overcrowded camps along the Colombia-Venezuela border. The ripple effects threaten to destabilize the entire region, raising concerns for U.S. national security and economic interests. The Trump administration frames its potential actions as a mission to save the Venezuelan people from oppression and deprivation. Humanitarian aid, emblazoned with the American flag, is sent to the border, symbolizing U.S. support for those in need and a warning to the Maduro regime. National security concerns are heightened by reports of alleged ties between Maduro's government and international terror groups. U.S. intelligence warns that Venezuela could become a safe haven for criminal networks, further threatening regional stability. In response, President Trump has drawn a clear red line. He has stated unequivocally that all options are on the table, including military force. This message is meant to deter Maduro and signal to allies and adversaries alike that the U.S. is prepared to act if necessary. Despite years of escalating sanctions and intense diplomatic pressure, the Maduro regime has not budged. Negotiations have repeatedly failed, and the suffering of ordinary Venezuelans continues unabated. Critics of intervention warn of the dangers of military action, pointing to the costly and protracted wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They argue that a ground invasion could lead to unintended consequences, regional chaos, and a new cycle of violence. Yet, there are powerful voices urging action, insisting that inaction only allows the humanitarian disaster to worsen. They argue that the world cannot turn away while Venezuelan children starve and democracy is crushed. For President Trump and his advisors, the stakes are high. They must weigh the risks of intervention against the moral and strategic costs of doing nothing. In their view, the risk of inaction may ultimately outweigh the dangers of stepping in, as the world waits to see what America will do next. The U.S. military's actions in the region have become impossible to ignore. Over the past several months, American forces have steadily increased their visibility along the Latin American coastline, with warships patrolling international waters and convoys moving along tropical shores. These maneuvers are not just routine exercises, they are calculated displays of power, designed to send a clear and unmistakable message to Caracas and the Venezuelan leadership. The presence of U.S. military assets so close to Venezuelan territory is a deliberate signal, a show of strength meant to deter any aggressive moves and to reassure American allies in the region. The Southern Command, responsible for U.S. military operations in Latin America and the Caribbean, has ramped up its activities, deploying additional ships and personnel to the Caribbean Sea. Their patrols are now more frequent and more visible than ever before. A powerful carrier strike group is currently conducting freedom of navigation exercises just off the coast of Venezuela. Fighter jets roar off the decks, practicing maneuvers that demonstrate both readiness and reach, underscoring the U.S. commitment to maintaining open sea lanes and projecting power in the hemisphere. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force has intensified its reconnaissance missions, flying advanced surveillance aircraft along the Venezuelan border. These flights gather crucial intelligence, mapping out terrain and monitoring troop movements, all in preparation for any potential escalation. Inside command centers, military intelligence officers pore over real-time data, analyzing satellite images and electronic signals. This intelligence gathering is a critical step, often preceding any major military operation, and it keeps decision-makers informed of every development on the ground. In Caracas, these maneuvers are viewed with deep suspicion. Many Venezuelans see the increased U.S. activity as a provocation, a possible prelude to invasion or intervention. The sight of foreign military aircraft overhead and warships on the horizon, Hatridi and Soksin, si Obisan, of anxiety and uncertainty. The constant presence of American military hardware, tanks, vehicles, and warships near Venezuelan territory contributes to a siege-like atmosphere. For local residents, the tension is palpable, and the sense of being surrounded is hard to escape. While much of this military buildup remains out of sight for the average American, for those living in the region and for U.S. service members on the ground, the mission is very real. Every patrol, every exercise, and every surveillance flight carries weight and consequence. The Pentagon maintains that these deployments are purely defensive, aimed at protecting U.S. interests and allies. Yet, in such a charged environment, the distinction between defense and offense becomes increasingly blurred, leaving the world to wonder what the next move will be. Nicolas Maduro is not backing down. He's rallying his supporters for a fight. He portrays Venezuela as a victim of American aggression, calling for national sovereignty. The government has mobilized armed forces and civilian militias for guerrilla warfare. The strategy is to make the cost of invasion high for the U.S. Venezuela's arsenal includes advanced Russian-made air defense systems. The Venezuelan military is trained to defend its territory, fighting on home turf. Maduro's defiance is fueled by national pride and a history of resisting foreign intervention. His supporters believe they are fighting for their country's survival against imperialism. China has entered the arena, expanding its influence in Latin America. Beijing's investments in Venezuela are crucial for both nations. China's support for Maduro challenges the Monroe Doctrine. By backing Venezuela, China sends a message: the U.S. no longer has a free hand in its hemisphere. China's involvement is not just economic, there are military signals too. Joint exercises with the Venezuelan Navy and military equipment sales show China's support. This involvement changes the crisis's nature, risking confrontation with a nuclear-armed superpower. China's presence acts as a deterrent, complicating U.S. military plans. The events in the Caribbean echo the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Then, the U.S. faced Soviet missiles in Cuba. Now, it's China's ties to Venezuela. The U.S. naval presence is a modern version of Kennedy's quarantine. While there are differences, the core issue of great power, competition, remains. Venezuela is now at the center of the rivalry between Beijing and Washington. The risk of miscalculation is chillingly similar to 1962. With military forces in close proximity, the potential for an accident is high. The ghost of 1962 warns of unpredictable and catastrophic consequences. In Caracas, the threat of a U.S. invasion is a real danger. Rumors and speculation add to the tension as people wait in line for essentials. The fear of conflict has led to hoarding and longer lines for gasoline. Despite the fear, life goes on with a surprising resilience. The community is strong, forged through years of hardship. The political crisis is just one more problem for many. The government's war preparations are visible, with militia patrols and military checkpoints. For Caracas residents, the geopolitical struggle is the backdrop to their lives. As the sun sets over the Caribbean, the world wonders what happens next. A full-scale U.S. invasion would lead to a prolonged conflict and regional destabilization. A limited military strike carries high risks of escalation. A continuation of the standoff would condemn Venezuelans to suffering. The best-case scenario is a diplomatic breakthrough, requiring concessions from all sides. The stakes are high, not just for Venezuela, but for global order. The world holds its breath, hoping for a peaceful resolution.